They say my name as if it meant something. Spartacus, the rebel, the gladiator, the slave who defied Rome. But before all that, I was just a man. A husband, a son, not a hero, not a legend. Just a man who wanted to go home. Before I was a gladiator, before Rome carved scars into my flesh, I had a home, I had a name, and I had her. She was a priestess of Dionysus. The Romans never said her name, but I remember it, whispered in the dark, sung in the wind, spoken in dreams. She said I was meant for something greater. I told her I was only meant for her. We lived simply, not rich, not poor, but rich in the way that matters. Warm bread, a fire at night, a body beside mine I would kill for and die for. Then Rome came. They said they needed soldiers, said they were allies of Thrace. But what they wanted was control. They took me for their wars, and when I resisted, they took her too. They sold us separately, tore her from my arms like a limb from my body. And still they couldn't kill the fire she lit in me. Even in chains, I carried her voice in my mind. I fought because I remembered her eyes. I survived because I swore I would see her again. So when they ask why I rebelled, understand this. I was not fighting Rome. I was fighting to become a man again. A man worthy of the love they tried to erase. They didn't take us to prison. They took us to a ludus, a place where men are unmade, then rebuilt into killers for sport. The gates closed behind me with a sound I still hear in my sleep. It wasn't just metal slamming shut. It was the sound of a world disappearing. Inside, the stench of sweat, blood, and fear hung in the air like smoke. They called us recruits, but we were livestock, inspected like cattle, trained like dogs. The first lesson was this: pain is the only language Rome respects. The second, your life is not yours. Eat when they say, sleep when they say, bleed when they say, kill when the crowd demands it. Some men broke quickly, others held on longer, but all of us broke eventually. They beat the Thracian out of me, stripped my name, my pride, my past. They gave me a number. They gave me a new title, Gladiator. But they never touched what mattered most. Not with whips, not with fire, not with fear. They broke bones. They starved flesh. But there was a place inside me they could never reach. A place where I kept her memory, folded like a sacred flame, untouched by Roman hands. It lived in the way I breathed when I was supposed to be broken, in the way I stared back when I was supposed to bow, in the silence between each blow. That's where I kept my rage. Not the wild kind that burns out, but the slow, cold kind. The kind that waits. The kind that builds. This wasn't training. It was preparation for death, staged for thousands of cheering strangers. They said the arena was glory. I knew it was just a grave with better lighting. You never forget the sound, not the clash of steel, not the screaming, not even your own breath catching in your throat, but the crowd. That's what haunts you. It isn't cheering, it's something older. Something primal. It's hunger. 1,000 voices, all demanding the same thing. Blood, pain, the final gasp of a dying man. They scream like wolves, not for justice, not for glory, but for the thrill of watching another man's life end in the dirt. And when they roar loud enough, you almost believe it means something. That your death might buy you more than silence, but it never does. They say the arena is where men become legends. No, it's where men die. Louder. They dressed me in armor too heavy to move, put me against a man twice my size, told us one of us would leave, then gave the signal. I didn't want to kill him, and he didn't want to kill me. We looked at each other in that moment. Two men, not enemies, not monsters, just men. Forced into a lie neither of us wrote, but Rome didn't care. They wanted a show, so we gave them one, not by choice, by design. I struck first. Instinct, fear, survival. And when he fell, and the blood soaked into the sand, his blood, I looked up. They roared, not in sorrow, not in shock, in delight. That was the day I learned what Rome truly loved. Not courage, not strength, not even victory. They loved violence. Refined like their wine, choreographed like their theater, packaged in flesh and blood for profit. We weren't warriors to them. We were distractions. And death was just part of the entertainment. They began to give us nicknames. Thracian, Shadow of Death, Son of Mars. Like it meant something. Like it changed what we were. They dressed us in titles the way they dressed us in armor, to make us easier to sell, to make the crowd believe we were legends. But legends don't sleep in chains. Legends don't bleed for someone else's coin. They tried to make us feel important, to believe we were admired, envied, even loved. As if applause could wash away the stench of slavery, as if fame could make the cage seem wider. But we weren't heroes. We were product. But fame in the arena is like perfume on a corpse. It only masks the rot. Each time I stepped onto that sand, I thought, maybe this time I'll die. And maybe in death, I'd find her. But I kept surviving, not because I was stronger, but because deep down a storm was building in me. A storm Rome could not see. Not yet. You wouldn't think friendship could grow in a place like that, where tomorrow's opponent might be tonight's bunkmate. But somehow, it did. Crixus. Gaulish fire. Hot-tempered. Proud and stubborn as stone. He hated me the moment he saw me. Maybe because I reminded him of what he lost. Maybe because I refused to bow. Maybe he still hated me in the end. But when the blades came, he was there, at my side, steel in hand, unflinching. Oenomaus. Once a free man, then a trainer of the condemned. He taught through pain, every lesson marked in bruises and broken ribs. But beneath the scars, there was a man trying to hold on to something. Honor, maybe, or the faint, flickering light of hope. And there were others, men pulled from every corner of the empire. Some spoke in broken Latin. Some didn't speak at all. They were fractured in ways I wasn't. But they weren't hollow. Not yet. We didn't share trust or stories, just glances, nods, a kind of silent agreement. If we're gonna die, let it mean something. Late at night, when the guards were drunk, we talked of escape. Not plans at first, just dreams. What would you do if you were free? I'd see the sea. I'd find my son. I'd never pick up a sword again. Me? I said nothing, because I couldn't admit what I feared most, that I wouldn't know how to be free anymore. But in that pit of death, among the damned, a strange kind of brotherhood grew. Not of love, but of shared pain, shared silence, shared rage. We didn't need to say it. We were all thinking the same thing. This cannot be all there is. And in the quiet between matches, between beatings, between the crowd's deafening hunger, a thought began to take shape. Not just escape, rebellion. There comes a moment when you stop waiting to die, and you decide to burn. It began with a pot. A kitchen slave slipped a blade into a loaf of bread. Another hid a sharpened bone in his sandal. It wasn't a grand plan. There was no map, no strategy, just desperation. We waited, not for hope, not for rescue, just for weakness. We waited until the guards were drunk, stumbling, loud, careless in their confidence. They laughed in their tower, secure behind stone and steel. Their world was full of wine and coin. Ours was filled with silence, the kind that hums before a storm. We bled beneath them, in shadows, in chains, but not without fire. And then we moved. Not like soldiers, like animals who had been caged too long. Every swing, every scream was a piece of ourselves breaking free. The gates weren't opened, they were torn apart. With fists, with fire, with fury. I didn't escape to fight. Fighting was never the goal. It was the price. I fought to escape. To breathe air that wasn't rationed, to walk without a chain's shadow, to remember what it felt like to move because I chose to. We didn't march out as an army. We exploded, a storm of fury, desperation, and bloodied hands. We spilled into the night like wolves unchained. Dozens at first, some limping, some bleeding, all burning. We had no food, no plan, no home. But for the first time in years, we had something Rome couldn't bottle, brand, or bury. Freedom. Not the kind they print on coins. The kind you feel in your lungs. And for that moment, that single sacred breath, we were free. They would come for us. Of course they would. Rome doesn't lose its toys without a fight. But for the first time in years, the air smelled like choice. "I'm coming for you," I whispered. Not to Rome, to her. We were fugitives, hunted, wounded, dismissed, but we were not fools. The ludus taught us how to fight, how to break bone, how to survive pain, how to read a man's fear in the twitch of his fingers. Rome taught us something else, how it thinks, how it moves, how it underestimates the broken. So we used both. Their training became our weapon, their arrogance, our camouflage. We weren't trying to win battles, not at first. We were trying to stay alive. But each time we struck, each time we disappeared into the mountains, Rome began to realize they hadn't escaped slaves, they'd awakened soldiers. Each victory brought more than blood. It brought echoes, rumors that spread faster than the legions chasing us. It brought weapons, ripped from the dead hands of those who thought us animals. Armor, still warm, still marked with Roman arrogance. But most of all, it brought people. Runaway slaves who had nothing but scars and fury. Disgraced soldiers cast out by the very empire they served. Farmers, miners, shepherds, men with no reason to hope, and every reason to fight. They came barefoot, with broken tools, with empty stomachs and haunted eyes, but they came, and together we stopped being fugitives. We became something else, a reckoning. We were no longer a handful of desperate men. We were an army. And they made me their leader, not because I wanted power, but because I had nothing left to fear. I didn't want war, not the kind that leaves bodies in fields and children without names to remember. I wanted home, not a country, a moment. Her face in the morning light, her voice humming in the quiet, her hand, small, calloused, steady, wrapped in mine. That was all. And they took it. Rome didn't just steal land. It stole futures. It rewrote love into loss. So no, I didn't seek war. But when the fire starts in your chest, and every breath reminds you of what they took, you learn that freedom was never going to be given. Freedom has a cost. And I was ready to pay it in full. Crixus wanted to march on Rome, to strike the beast in its chest, to make the Senate tremble and the streets run red. He believed in fire, in fury, in making them bleed where it hurt most. But I had seen Rome's heart, cold, stone wrapped in gold.
You don't wound it with steel. Not yet. It doesn't bleed from battle. It bleeds from doubt. So we moved like smoke, vanished into mountains where legions feared to climb. We struck where they were weakest. Supply lines, outposts, bridges, then we vanished again. Each time they chased us, they found nothing but ash and whispers. We didn't need to match their power, we made them question it. We didn't have an empire, so we turned fear into one.
And Rome noticed. Oh, they noticed. At first, they sent soldiers, standard-bearers with polished shields, marching in perfect lines, convinced we were just another flame to stamp out. Then they sent names, commanders with reputations, men who'd built their legacies, crushing uprisings before breakfast. And when that failed, they sent messages, not in parchment, in iron, in fire, in crucifixes along the road, a silent threat written in blood. But they were always a step too late. We were already ghosts, moving without pattern, fighting without mercy, an army without a banner, but not without purpose. They couldn't catch what they couldn't understand, and that terrified them. And every night I asked myself, would she even recognize me now? The man I've become? The things I've done? But the fire burned on. Because if I stopped now, it would all be for nothing. It had to end somewhere. Even fire burns out. Even storms pass. We had marched for nearly 2 years, over mountains, through snow, through villages that welcomed us as saviors, and others that feared us as death. We shattered Roman legions, humiliated their governors, turned their maps into questions, their pride into panic. But Rome doesn't bleed forever. It adapts, and then it strikes. So they sent Crassus, not a general, not a patriot, a banker with a sword, richer than the gods he worshipped, hungrier than any king who'd worn a crown. He didn't come for justice. He didn't come to restore order. He came to carve his name into history, and to do it with our corpses. He built a wall, not a metaphor, not strategy. Stone, earth, fire, a wall. From sea to sea, cutting the land like a scar. A barrier not just of stone, but of intent. He didn't chase us. He caged us. trapped us in the South, starved us of movement, of options, of hope. Forts every mile, watchtowers like vultures, guards in shifts so tight you couldn't even whisper without an echo finding steel. Every breath we took, he tried to own. Every silence we shared, he tried to fill with fear. The dream began to crack. Not from Rome's swords, but from the silence between our own men. Hunger set in, cold crept through the bones, faith began to rot. Some slipped away in the night, fleeing not the enemy, but the hopelessness growing in our camp. Others turned traitor, bartered freedom for favor, spoke Roman words with rebel mouths. Even Crixus, fierce, loyal, the fire I never tamed. He died in a battle I couldn't stop. Not for lack of trying, but because even storms can't hold forever. I watched his body fall beneath a banner he had sworn to break, and I knew. The end wasn't coming, it was already here. Still, we fought on. Because even if we could not win, we could choose how we'd fall. And I told them this. Rome sees us as beasts. Let them see how beasts die. We charged like thunder, not as soldiers, as something older, wilder. Every cry was a song of defiance, an anthem sung not with voices but with blades, with broken spears, with bare, bloodied hands. Every strike, every wound, was a memory of the chains we shattered, a reminder that we had once knelt and vowed never to again. I don't know how long I fought. Time blurred. The sun vanished behind screams. Everything melted into pain, into fury, into silence. Not peace, just the absence of noise, the kind that follows when there's nothing left to give but your last breath. They say no one found my body. No grave, no bones, no sword left in the dust. Good, because I was never meant to be buried. Not in earth, not in history, not in silence. I was never just one man. I was every slave who dared to lift their head when the world told them to bow. Every soul who looked at chains and said, no more. Every whisper in the dark, every scream that tore through the sand, every defiant breath taken beneath the weight of empire. I am Spartacus. And so is every voice that dares to rise when power demands silence. After the final battle, they made their message clear. They lined the Appian Way from Capua to the gates of Rome with 6,000 crosses. Wood, rope, flesh, silence. A warning, they said, a symbol of Roman order, a lesson carved in agony. But they were wrong. They didn't build a warning. They built a monument, not to Rome's power, but to its fear, to the fire it tried to smother and failed. Those weren't just crosses, they were echoes, each one bearing the name of a man who chose to stand when kneeling would have been easier, not to Roman strength, but to the truth they couldn't kill, to the fire they couldn't contain. They tried to erase us, scrubbed our names from records, burned our stories, spoke of us only in shame and whispers. But history has a way of remembering what empires try to forget. Not the senators, not the generals in their polished armor, whose names crumble with the stone that bore them. No, the world remembers us. The nameless, the broken, the defiant. The ones who stood when standing meant death, the ones who fell with fists clenched, not in defeat, but in defiance. The ones who dared to dream that freedom was worth dying for. They say I died. On a battlefield. beneath the banners of Rome, forgotten among the dust and blood. But I didn't. I became something else, a whisper in chains, a spark in every rebellion, a question that still haunts every empire built on fear. What if the powerless refused to be afraid? What if one voice became many? What if a name became a fire? I am Spartacus, and if you choose to stand, so are you.